This is the updated Tesla Model 3, and in this review, I'm going to tell you why I think this is not just one of the best EVs that you can get, it's also one of the best cars that you can get for this kind of money. Stay tuned, and if you haven't already, please do like and subscribe, and if you have already, thank you very much. Let's get to it. At launch, there are two different takes on the Model 3. And there will be a third take, an all-wheel drive performance version, but you'll have to wait for that. So these two versions do have their own roles to play. This one here is the entry-level model. It's called the rear-wheel drive, imaginatively, and it's basically just a single motor, standard range version of the Model 3. It's around $60,000 before on-road costs, but hey, take the pricing with a grain of salt because Tesla seems to change its prices fairly regularly, so this might be out of date by the time you watch it. I'm filming this mid-December 2023, so 60 grand or thereabouts for the entry-level model. And if you want a longer range version with more power and all-wheel drive, then that's available for an extra $10,000 or thereabouts. And for me, I don't think that I would spend the extra money because this one seems to stack up really well, specifically when we're talking about standard equipment. So in this car, you get LED lighting on the outside with auto high beam lights. There's also 18-inch alloy wheels, although this car is fitted with 19-inch optional wheels that cost $1,800 extra. You've also got LED tail lights as well and a panoramic glass roof too. Yes, you can get shades to put in the glass roof if you wish. And the control center on the inside of the car is the 15.4-inch touchscreen media system, which might not have things like Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it does have a bunch of different apps and usability to the screen, which I'll touch on more on the interior section. There's also ambient lighting inside the car now, which does lift the cabin ambience, surprisingly enough. And then you've also got a standard black anti-leather interior. I mean, it's not leather, it's a vinyl finish, but this car is fitted with the optional white interior pack, which costs quite a bit more, and I wouldn't choose it personally because, well, I have a kid, and kids make mess. You've got heated and cooled front seats, which is really, really great on hot days like today. There's heated outboard rear seats as well. And there's a bunch of safety technology and equipment, which I'll cover later on in this review. So I reckon that it does stack up really well when it comes to standard equipment, but tell me what you think in the comments and whether you think it stacks up well enough against these rivals that I'm going to tell you about. If you're looking to spend about this kind of money for about this size of car with about this much EV driving range, then you've got a few really good alternatives to the Model 3, which you didn't have when this car launched. Firstly, the BYD Seal. Now, that car does have 3 different grades available. It's also starting at a much more affordable price point than the Model 3, and there's a really, really fast one as well. So that might be what tickles your fancy, but I reckon that it does stack up from a technology perspective. There's a lot of tech on the inside. It's also got heaps of driving range too, and the choice of rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive if that's what you desire. Another really great alternative to the Model 3 is the Hyundai Ioniq 6. Now, it's an electrified streamliner, so it's a very aerodynamically efficient EV sedan, and I reckon it looks great from some angles, other angles not so much. Tell me what you think in the comments. But it does have a bunch of different variants available. It does start at a higher price point though, so it's not necessarily as interesting if you are on a really tight budget. And if you are on a really, really tight budget and you're not sold on the whole sedan thing, then what about checking out the MG4? I think it is the best affordable EV that I've ever tested in terms of driving excitement. And while it might have a bit of a minimalist interior, it's very, very good to drive and very fun. And also it does have a fast one if that's what you want, and it costs less than the slowest Tesla Model 3. But hey, it's a hatchback. It doesn't have the looks that appeal to everyone. I know there are people out there who don't love the MG4 appearance, but tell me which one you would pick, or if there's an alternative that I haven't listed here, let me know. It might have a new look, but it hasn't really changed in terms of the dimensions. So you do have new headlights and a new front bumper, which is more aerodynamically advanced than the existing version. And there's also still these nice 19-inch wheels, and really, I still think that it does look pretty good in terms of the exterior design. All right, let's check out the boot because, hey, it's bigger than you might expect. So yes, you do get an electric tailgate, as you would probably expect for a vehicle like this. It's a big, deep boot. It's very, very deep, in fact, and there's extra storage underneath the floor here, as you'll see. That just means you've got super practicality in the boot. And there's also a frunk at the front of the car as well, so you can store your cables or something like that, if you option to have a cable as part of your car. Now, speaking of options, there is no tyre that you can option as a spare here. You can option a tyre repair kit to have in the boot at all times, which I would do if I was you, because they aren't run flat tyres. And also, it means that if you were to get a flat, you would have to call a tow truck. And that's not very green or eco-minded, is it? If you are a fan of minimalist interiors, then you're going to really like the cabin of the Model 3, even though it is a bit more maximalist compared to the last version. So now there's an ambient light strip that runs around the top of the dashboard, onto the doors and into the back doors as well. And that means that you do have a bit more wow factor in the cabin. It does also add some kid-friendly factor. There's some stuff in the back I'll show you in a sec which does too, but you've also got things like dog mode on the air conditioning setup. So you can basically have the car come up with a display to tell people that yes, you know that there's a dog in your car and you've got the air conditioning running. You can have camp mode as well. So it will basically have the air conditioning available to you, and the media display will stay on while you're in the car if you're sleeping in the car for whatever reason. Okay, so a lot of the stuff you have to do in this car is done through the screen, obviously. It is the control center for this vehicle. Even things like adjusting your steering wheel, so you use the toggles on the wheel to put it in or out or up or down. You adjust your mirrors through the screen as well, so again, no little buttons on the side. All of that is, in my opinion, a cost-cutting exercise, because it's easier to make software than it is to make bits that go inside cars. Light controls are in there as well, and as you probably know, this updated Model 3 doesn't have blinker stalks even, or wiper stalks anymore, so you control those things on the steering wheel now. Again, it's not going to be for everyone, and I can understand if it's not for you, fine, that's cool. See you later, thanks for watching. But if you are okay with doing a lot through the screen, there is a lot on offer through the screen here, because it's basically the centerpiece of this cabin. I just like the fact that it's a quick screen when it comes to load times. It's easy to learn, even though it is complex. And I know that sounds counterintuitive, but trust me, you will get used to it quicker than you think. All right, let's talk about some of the other elements of this cabin. Another really smart thing that I love is that you've got dual wireless phone charging pads. So there's two pads there that can both charge phones, so you and your partner or your kids can have their phones charging up while you're driving. You've also obviously got a Bluetooth connectivity system in this car, but as I mentioned, no wireless Apple CarPlay, wired Apple CarPlay, or Android Auto supported in this system. Now, down here you'll find a big storage section. There's a couple of cup holders hidden away behind these little covers, which are nicely finished. You've also got a covered center console bin here too, which is a decent size. You've got bottle holders in the doors. The adjustment for the seats, thankfully, there are buttons still on the seats, and yes, it's electric seat adjustment for the driver's seat and the passenger seat too. Look, you might love the Hollywood smile white optional interior, but it's not for me. I just can't bear to think what my daughter and my two dogs would do to this car if I optioned this interior finish. But hey, for a single or a couple, or maybe you've got grown kids, it could be fine. Now, speaking of kids and speaking of practicality, let's jump in the back seat and see what it's like. Now, if you've done any research on the Model 3 update up to this point, you probably already know that the big news in the back seat is the fact that you do have a screen now. I know you're probably thinking, a screen? Well, aren't kids just playing on their phones all the time? Adults as well? Well, yes, they are, but this does offer some extra functionality. It's not just for media, although you can watch YouTube or Netflix or a bunch of other things using that little screen. That's handy to see, but it's also for your climate control adjustments. Love the fact that you can basically choose where the airflow is headed in the back as well. Also, your rear seat heating buttons are down there, and you can adjust this front passenger seat to be out of your way if you want to. So that could be handy if you're using this car as an Uber vehicle, for instance. All right, so let's talk about backseat space then. I'm 182 centimeters or 6 foot. My biggest issue in the back here is foot room. It's a bit tight, so this seat is set for my driving position, and yeah, my toes are pretty hard underneath the seat ahead. I've got pretty big feet, size 12, so headroom's not too bad, although my head is very, very close to the glass roof. But thankfully, there's not a whole lot of heat coming in through the glass roof, even though it's, what, 33 degrees outside right now. So it's a hot day, but it's not letting too much heat in. Although there is also optional shade panels if you wish to get them for this car. Now, you've also got some handy little pop-out hooks here, lights up here as well, which you can turn off just by touching. It's very nice to see. You've also got some other practicality, like these pull-down pockets on the seat backs. There's ISOFIX points in the window seats as well. You also get top tether points on the window seats, but not for the center seat. So it's not necessarily going to be suitable if you plan to put 3 child seats in the back of this car. It's not probably going to be big enough for that anyway. Buy a Model Y if that's you. I know people who have done that for that reason. Now, you've also got bottle holders in the doors, but while there is no top tether point and there is no adjustability to the headrest here, you can fold this seat down. You get an armrest with cup holders, which is nice. And look, it's a very practical space. A couple of USB-C ports down there as well to keep kids' phones charged up if they don't agree on what to watch on that little screen. So yeah, it's nice, comfy enough, I reckon. Okay, there are 2 different takes of the Model 3 right now. So the entry-level version is this rear-wheel drive one here. It's a single motor at the back axle with a single-speed transmission, and it does have a fair amount of power. Look, Tesla doesn't quote power and torque figures, but I managed to find a power figure which I think is accurate, and if that's the case, then that's plenty for a car of this size. In fact, it's more than enough. But if you want more and you want more range, which I'll get to in a sec, then you need to buy the long range all-wheel drive model, which adds another motor at the front axle and gets a bigger battery pack, but also gets more power. So it does have 366 kilowatts, according to the figures I've seen, and a whole lot more torque than that as well. So this is a super speedy car. If you choose the all-wheel drive one, it's about 4 seconds 0 to 100, and even this one's about 6 seconds. So neither of them are slow. Even the slow one isn't slow, and then there's an even faster one coming. So hey, ticks the box there. Whether you choose the rear-wheel drive or the all-wheel drive version of the Model 3, you get 11 kilowatt AC charging, which is faster than most. And that means that at home, you'll be able to charge a little bit quicker than if you bought a rival EV from a different brand. But keep in mind that you have to pay to get a cable included with your Model 3. It's an optional extra, and you'll obviously have to pay to get a home charger installed as well if that's what you want. If you're going to be more likely to rely on the supercharger network or any other fast charge network, keep in mind that you will have to pay for that as well. There is no free supercharging anymore. But DC charging is something you need to consider. So the rear-wheel drive version of this car caps out at 170 kilowatts for DC charging. If you choose the long-range all-wheel drive version, 250 kilowatts is the maximum charge rate. So it will be a little bit quicker to fill up its bigger battery pack. Now let's talk about battery packs. So the rear-wheel drive model has a 60 kilowatt hour LFP battery pack. And that means you can charge it to 100% constantly and it shouldn't degrade the battery. Whereas if you choose the all-wheel drive version of this car, it's an NMC pack. It's a carryover from the last one, and the recommendation is that you don't exceed 90% when recharging to prolong the life of that battery pack. Okay, so first things first, when you do decide that you are ready to go for a drive, there's no start button to press, and when you are ready to drive, there's a few different ways that you can kick things off. So you can either tap the accelerator or the brake pedal depending on what the screen tells you to do, and that will mean that you can just simply drive away, or you can use this toggle switch on the screen to choose between reverse and drive. You just slide up to go to drive, down to go to reverse, and if that fails for whatever reason, there's also some buttons up here in the light cluster, so you can adjust to drive or reverse just using those buttons instead. But yeah, so you have to sort of rethink the way that you drive. There's other ways you have to sort of rethink the way that you drive because there's no indicator stalks. So you've got buttons on the steering wheel that just basically act as your indicators. And it's not unusual. There are other brands that have done this in the past, but those are supercar brands, not mainstream brands. It does take a little bit of getting used to, but I'm used to it already. I've been driving this car for a couple of days now, and I reckon that you do get used to it pretty quickly. Now, there's other elements of this drive experience which are vastly improved compared to the previous version of the Model 3. So, namely, the ride comfort is considerably better. The last version of this car, it was like they put it all together and forgot to tune the suspension for what it was supposed to do, which is suspend the car from the road surface. It just felt a lot of the lumps and bumps in the surface below. And this is still on the firm side. I haven't tested a version of the Model 3 with the 18-inch wheel package, which means you do have a slightly smaller wheel and a slightly thicker sidewall on the tyre. But these 19-inch wheels with the optional wheel package and those excellent hand-cooked tyres, well, they're doing the job, I'm telling you. It does still have a firm edge to the ride, but it's not uncomfortable in my opinion, and certainly rides better than some other affordable EVs out there. Another thing that Tesla just nails is the regenerative braking system. So you just take your foot off the accelerator and look, you can trust that it will progressively come to a halt, and it'll do that repeatedly, and it's very, very predictable in terms of the, I guess, efficiency or aggression of the regenerative braking system. I find it to be probably the best regen braking system in terms of predictability and drivability. And you've still got a really nice pedal feel when you do decide to use the friction brakes and come to a quicker halt if you need to. It is very, very predictable. They're nice feeling and very positive responsiveness to the pedal as well. So, yeah, I reckon that it does those things really well. I also reckon that it steers really well too. Look, it's got quite a small feeling steering wheel, and it's got quite a direct rack as well. So what I mean by that is it doesn't take much to change direction in this car, especially at lower speeds. So that means that it is very easy to drive in urban situations, or even on the freeway. It's got nice predictability to the steering responsiveness as well. So I guess that's the theme of this car. It is predictable. The response is mostly very, very good in most situations. There are some things that I've found during my time in this car that have been a bit unpredictable. The traffic aware cruise control system, which will sort of monitor everything that's happening around the car using a series of cameras and radars and sensors and stuff. It's not as good as some other systems I've sampled, and I say that because at times it was phantom braking in tunnels, like repeatedly phantom braking for no reason. There was no traffic light, there was no stopped vehicle, it was an 80 zone, everything was flowing freely, and it just slammed on the brakes repetitively. And yeah, I was not happy with that experience, and I wouldn't be if that was the sort of thing I encountered every day. Like, I live in the west of Sydney in the Blue Mountains, and if I'm commuting, I have to go to the city and I have to use a series of tunnels to do it. And every time I've driven this car in tunnels, it's phantom braked a lot, which is not great. Being an EV, it does have that super linear, very nice acceleration. You just put your foot down and it rockets away. If you are new to the EV world and you're considering this as your first electric vehicle, just be aware that it doesn't behave like a petrol car. There's not as much lag or I guess hesitancy to contend with when you are all of a sudden needing to accelerate around something or away from a traffic light. So just keep that in mind, just with any EV. If you're considering going to an EV and you've been driving a petrol car or a diesel car up till now, yeah, they're speedy. Also, look, this is the rear wheel drive one, so it's the slow one, but it's still kind of face meltingly fast. And if you're after a relatively quick EV, but not the super duper fast one, this is still going to tick the box for you. And it is really, really nice to drive. I came into this sort of expecting it to be okay, but yeah, I'm really impressed. It's also relatively quiet. There is a little bit of road noise intrusion at times, and I've got the air conditioning running right now because it's 38 degrees outside. So yeah, it is relatively quiet. The acoustic glass seems to make it quieter than the previous version of the Model 3, which I drove, must have been a year and a half ago now. And I still think that this is arguing a really strong case, not only for an EV at this kind of money, but for any car at this kind of money. This is a really compelling car to drive and really, really nice to live with. I haven't driven the long range all-wheel drive version yet, but I suspect that if it's like the last one, it will just be considerably quicker if you need that, but also with the sure-footedness of all-wheel drive to offer you that extra traction in loose surface situations. Maybe if you go to the snow a lot, then it might be worth waiting for the all-wheel drive one, or ordering the all-wheel drive one and spending the extra $10,000 to do it. Hey, if you go to the snow a lot, it's probably just like a weekend at Perisher. Okay, let's talk about efficiency. So the official energy consumption figure for this version of the Model 3 is 13.2 kilowatt hours per 100 kilometers. Now, if you're wondering what I've seen across a few days of testing this car, that will come up on your screen now. And to me, that just goes to further the argument that this is a really, really good car, super efficiency focused, and actually it's going to be really affordable to live with, especially if you have a solar array at home and you're willing to charge it off peak and that sort of thing. It will make a lot of sense to own. Speaking of ownership, let's talk about that. It's been pretty good up until this point, but the warranty cover for the Model 3 is not fantastic. It's a 4-year, 80,000 kilometer warranty for the car itself, which is way less than what you get from other brands selling EVs in Australia. And that might rule it out for you. I could totally understand that. Keep in mind though that you do get a longer warranty for the battery and drive unit, no matter which version of the Model 3 you choose. However, there is a difference between the two. So if you choose the single motor rear wheel drive model, you get a shorter kilometer duration for your warranty. It's 8 years, but 160,000 Ks. And if you choose the all-wheel drive long-range version, it's got a few more mechanical complexities going on there, and it's 192,000 kilometers of warranty cover. So look, I think that it does stack up pretty well from the battery and drive unit warranty stuff, but the car itself maybe not as good as it could be. Now, also keep in mind, when it comes to servicing this car, there are no set service intervals. There are some recommendations that you might want to check out on the Tesla website in terms of keeping an eye on your brake fluid, your tires. You can get them rotated every 20,000 Ks or so. Those sorts of things that you will probably do with a normal car anyway, but you don't necessarily have to book in every year to have your car checked over. So that might appeal to you, and I can understand why it would. The Model 3 has a maximum 5-star ANCAP safety rating from 2019, so that's a little bit out of date now, but it does have a bunch of really great safety technology fitted to this car, including autonomous emergency braking, there's pedestrian detection, there's obstacle detection and car detection as well. It's also got traffic aware cruise control, so it'll keep an eye on what's happening around the car and adapt the car's behavior to the situation, which is really good technology when it works. There's also adaptive cruise control as part of that. There's lane keeping assistance. You've got a blind spot monitoring system with little displays in the edges here next to the mirror that show you if there is something in your blind spot, and it shows up as a camera view on the screen as well. There's also a reversing camera system with side cameras and parking sensors. Look, there are some optional safety features that you might want to choose. The enhanced autopilot system, which includes navigation-based autopilot and lane-changing assistance as well, and a few more features to come, like summon. So it'll come to you, the car will come to you when you summon it. And then there's also the full autopilot system, or full self-driving as it's called, although that isn't necessarily guaranteed to be available because regulations might stop that, but we'll have to wait and see. And at least there is the option of, adding your $10,000 to Elon Musk's bank account if that's what you want to do. The updated version of the Tesla Model 3 is much improved compared to the original take on this theme. I reckon that this is one of the greatest EVs for the money, and in fact I think it will be a really great option for people who are looking for something that is considered a safe bet in the EV market, because, well, it's got a bit of brand cachet, the old Tesla, doesn't it? Let me know what you think in the comments section below. I'd love to hear from you, and please like and subscribe if you haven't already, and if you have, thanks again, it means a lot. And I'll see you in the next one.